She was the first crowned Queen of England, a woman who fought for her throne, her faith, and her father's legacy. Yet history remembers her not for her triumphs, but for the smoke rising from Oxford's pyres. Was Mary Tudor truly bloody, or just a queen caught in a war where heresy was treason? And mercy, weakness, picture this: a little girl, born in 1516, wrapped in fine linen, heralded across Europe, not just as a princess, but as the asterisk hope of a new dynasty. Her name was Mary, her father, Henry VIII, charismatic, powerful, the very image of a Renaissance king. Her mother, Catherine of Aragon, devout, dignified, the daughter of Spain's legendary monarchs. Mary wasn't just royal blood. She was beloved asterisk. Ambassadors wrote home about her sharp mind, her grace at the virginals, how she spoke Latin like a scholar by age 9. She danced at court festivals, received betrothal proposals from emperors, and believed, to her core, that she was exactly where she was meant to be, the heir, the future queen. Then it all fell apart. It wasn't sudden. It was slow, cruel, and deeply personal. As her mother aged and failed to produce a son, Henry's affection cooled, then vanished. When Anne Boleyn entered the picture, the court shifted like sand. Whispers turned to edicts, and in 1533, with the stroke of a pen and the backing of a breakaway church, everything Mary knew was declared a lie. Her parents' marriage invalid, her own birth illegitimate. Overnight, Princess Mary became the Lady Mary, a title stripped of honor, a phrase spat with condescension. She was forbidden from seeing her mother in her final, feverish days. She was sent to serve in the household of her baby half-sister, Elizabeth, the child whose very existence erased her. Guards watched her. Officials pressured her. Again and again, she was asked to sign a document admitting her parents had lived in sin. Each refusal brought tighter confinement, threats, even talk of execution. She got sick often, probably from stress, isolation, the weight of a world telling her she didn't belong, and yet she held on, not with rage, at least not outwardly, but with quiet, unshakable faith. In the rosary she clutched, in the Latin prayers whispered in shuttered rooms, in the memory of her mother's voice saying, asterisk, "You are who you are, no matter what they call you." Asterisk years passed. Henry died. Her brother Edward, bright, frail, raised steeped in Protestant doctrine, took the throne. For a while they exchanged letters, gifts. She even visited him. But as his reign deepened, the reforms accelerated. Altars stripped, statues pulled down, the Mass outlawed. Mary held private Mass in her own home, at great risk, and was nearly arrested for it. Still, she endured. Then Edward died at 16, and everything changed in a heartbeat. A faction at court tried to skip her entirely, installing Lady Jane Grey, a girl queen, for just 9 days. But Mary, she didn't wait for permission. She rode north, raised her standard, and watched, astonished, maybe even tearful, as nobles, soldiers, and ordinary folk flocked to her cause. Not because she promised gold or revenge, but because to them she represented something deeper, legitimacy. Continuity, justice. When she entered London that July, the streets erupted, not just in cheers, but in asterisk relief asterisk. Flowers rained down, bells rang for hours. After decades of being told she was asterisk, nothing asterisk, here she was, England's first crowned queen in her own right. She hadn't seized the throne. She'd asterisk reclaimed asterisk it, and for the first time in her life, she believed the world finally saw her, as she'd always known herself to be. When Mary finally stepped into the throne room at Whitehall, not as a supplicant, not as the lady, but as asterisk queen asterisk, her first instinct wasn't vengeance. It was repair. She knew the country was raw, split by theology, exhausted by upheaval, wary of another Tudor swing between Catholic and Protestant extremes. So she moved carefully, at first almost gently, She kept many of Edward's counsellors in place, honored property rights even for those who'd bought former church lands, and made it clear no one would be hunted for past beliefs yet asterisk. People noticed. A Protestant tailor in London wrote in his diary that the Queen's grace shows more mildness than was hoped. Even hardline reformers, like the fiery preacher John Rogers, weren't immediately jailed. They were watched, yes, but given room to breathe. Base enough that many chose exile over confrontation, slipping across the Channel to Frankfurt or Geneva with their families and manuscripts intact. Mary believed time and truth would win the day. She brought back candle-lit masses, processions on saints' days, the scent of incense in chapels long stripped bare, not by decree alone, but by quiet reawakening. She invited bishops to preach reconciliation, not damnation, and for a while it worked. Parishes readjusted, people knelt again. Even some former reformers, weary of doctrinal whiplash, returned to the old ways without protest. But then came Wyatt's rebellion in early 1554. Violent uprising dressed as patriotism, fueled by fear of Spanish influence and Protestant panic. Though Mary's own cousin led the revolt, and though the rebels shouted liberty, and down with the Spaniard, their pamphlets also warned of popish tyranny, and idolatry restored. When she rode through London after crushing it, unarmed, defiant, addressing the crowd from the steps of St. Paul's, she didn't gloat. She pleaded, I am your queen, your sister, your fellow Christian. I desire no subject's blood but injustice. Yet inside, something had shifted. The rebellion proved that for some, her very existence, the Catholic queen, the Spanish match, was intolerable. Exile presses in Strasbourg and Zurich began circulating vicious caricatures. Mary as Jezebel, as the whore of Babylon, calling openly for her assassination. Rome, too, grew impatient. Pope Julius Roman III sent Cardinal Pole, not just as a diplomat, but as a reformer with a mandate. England must be truly Catholic again, not just in ceremony, but in soul. And when Pole arrived, the tone changed. Visitations intensified, parish priests were questioned, hidden English Bibles were seized, still, recantation was offered, again and again. John Rogers, imprisoned for months, was brought before bishops 7 times, each time urged to take back his writings, to kneel at Mass, to save himself. He refused, not with shouts, but with calm, sorrowful resolve, and so, on a chill February morning in 1555, he became the first to burn at Smithfield. The crowd didn't cheer, many wept. A woman threw faggots on the pyre not in hatred, but in pity, hoping to hasten his end. That was the moment leniency ended, not because Mary suddenly loved fire, but because she believed, with tragic certainty, that every unrepentant heretic was a spark waiting to ignite another rebellion. And this time, she couldn't afford the flames to spread. It's easy to picture Mary signing death warrants late at night in some shadowy chamber, personally feeding names to the executioner. But the truth was far more systemic, even bureaucratic. The burnings weren't rogue acts of cruelty. They were carried out under reactivated medieval law, administered through formal courts, and justified by centuries of Christian jurisprudence. The key instrument. De heretico comburendo on the burning of heretics, a statute first passed in 1001 under Henry Roman IV, dormant for decades, but revived by Parliament in 1554, with overwhelming support, even from some who privately sympathized with reform. Under this law, heresy wasn't just a theological error. It was treason against God and the state, a corruption of the social order as dangerous as plotting regicide. The process began not with arrest, but with investigation. Bishops and their commissaries launched visitations across dioceses, questioning parishioners on doctrine, and did they believe in transubstantiation? Did they accept the authority of the Pope? Did they own or read prohibited books like Tyndale's New Testament? Those who faltered were summoned, not to the Tower, but to ecclesiastical courts, often held in cathedral chapter houses or local guild halls, where they faced learned clerics, not soldiers. They were given time, sometimes weeks or months, to reflect, to debate, to recant. Many did. They performed public penance, processions in sackcloth, floggings, standing barefoot for hours before the altar, and were spared. But for those who stood firm, like the Marian martyrs chronicled in Foxe's Book of Martyrs *, the path narrowed sharply. After formal condemnation by the church court, the heretic was relaxed to the secular arm, a chilling legal euphemism meaning the church washed its hands and handed the condemned over to civil authorities, who, by law, had to carry out the sentence, death by burning. Sheriffs, mayors, and town officials, ordinary men upholding local order, organized the executions. Wood was purchased from city funds. Sites were chosen for maximum visibility. Smithfield in London, the ditch outside Canterbury's city walls, the ditch at Gloucester, and especially Oxford, where Bishops Latimer, Ridley, and Cranmer were executed in sequence, forming a university town into a theater of ideological purification. Even the method followed grim protocol. Gunpowder bags were sometimes tied to the victims' chests, not out of mercy, but to shorten suffering and prevent last-minute recantations that might undermine the spectacle's message. The state didn't act alone. Local communities were involved, sometimes reluctantly. Parish records show payments to constables for guarding prisoners, to carters for hauling wood, to executioners for painful duty. And while Mary ultimately bore sovereign responsibility, she could have halted the law, as Elizabeth later did. Enforcement lay with bishops like Edmund Bonner of London or Anthony Kitchen of Andaff, men enforcing what they saw as divine duty, not personal vendetta. This wasn't mob violence. It was law, cold, deliberate, and, in the eyes of its architects, tragically necessary. Oxford in the autumn of 1555 wasn't just a city, it was a stage. The university, long a cradle of theological debate, now became the epicenter of a state, ancient spectacle where doctrine was tested not in lecture halls, but in fire. The choice of location was no accident. This was where the intellectual architects of the English Reformation had once taught, where Cranmer had studied, where Latimer had preached, where Ridley had shaped a generation of reformers. To execute them, there was to symbolically dismantle the movement at its source, not just silencing dissent, but erasing its legitimacy in the very place it was born. On October 16, Nicholas Ridley, Bishop of London, and Hugh Latimer, the fiery former Bishop of Worcester, were led to a single stake erected outside Balliol College. They wore no chains, only simple gowns, and they walked arm in arm, praying aloud. When the fire was lit, Latimer, ever the pastor, turned to Ridley and uttered words that would echo for centuries. Be of good comfort, Master Ridley, and play the man. We shall this day light such a candle, by God's grace, in England, as I trust shall never be put out. Witnesses, students. Townsfolk, officials, stood not in celebration, but in stunned silence. Some wept openly. Others looked away. The execution wasn't swift. Green wood was used, prolonging the agony, and Ridley suffered terribly, while Latimer, mercifully, suffocated quickly from smoke. 5 months later, in March 1556, Thomas Cranmer, the architect of the Book of Common Prayer, the man who had annulled Mary's parents' marriage, was brought to the same site. But his fate was designed to be even more crushing. After months of imprisonment and psychological pressure, he had signed multiple recantations, denouncing Protestantism and affirming papal supremacy. The regime expected a humiliating public retraction, a final decisive blow to the reformers' morale. Instead, as he stood before the crowd, Cranmer stunned onlookers by withdrawing his recantations. Asterisk, I come to the great thing that troubleth my conscience more than any other. Asterisk. He began, voice trembling but clear, asterisk. As for the Pope, I refuse him as Christ's enemy and Antichrist, with all his false doctrine. Asterisk. Then, in a final act of defiance, he thrust the hand that had signed the recantations into the flames first. Asterisk, this hand hath offended. Asterisk. That moment, so theatrical, so personal, transformed Cranmer not into a broken traitor, but into a martyr of almost mythic stature. News of the Oxford burnings spread faster than the smoke. Letters flew across England. Pamphlets smuggled abroad carried eyewitness accounts, not dry reports, but visceral, emotional narratives. The smell of burning flesh, the calm of the dying men, the tears of onlookers. These weren't anonymous victims. They were bishops, scholars, men of learning and conviction, and their deaths made heresy feel human, even noble, to many who'd remained neutral. In villages and parishes, quiet conversations turned into whispered resistance. The state had hoped the burnings would terrify England into conformity. Instead, Oxford lit the fuse for something far more dangerous to Mary's vision: memory, myth, and moral outrage. The candle Latimer promised. It was already burning, in print, in prayer, in the growing conviction that no queen, however anointed, had the right to command a man's conscience, or his God. The name Bloody Mary didn't haunt her in life. It followed her like a ghost into history. During her reign, opponents called her harsh things: the Spanish woman's daughter, the Pope's lackey, but never asterisk that asterisk. The epithet emerged slowly, quietly at first, then with gathering force, sharpened not by soldiers or rebels, but by ink and paper. Its chief architect was John Foxe, a Protestant exile who returned to England under Elizabeth I, and in 1563 published *Actes and Monuments*, better known as Foxe's Book of Martyrs*. It wasn't just a chronicle. It was a masterpiece of propaganda, lavishly illustrated, emotionally devastating, and distributed by royal decree to be placed in every cathedral and many parish churches across England. Readers didn't just learn about the burnings. They saw them. Woodcuts of Ridley and Latimer chained to the stake, Cranmer thrusting his hand into flame, mothers holding infants as they burned. The text framed each death not as judicial punishment, but as holy sacrifice, each victim a saint, each executioner a servant of Antichrist. And at the center of it all, the Queen, cold, implacable, divinely abandoned. Elizabeth's government had every reason to encourage this narrative. By painting Mary's reign as a 5-year nightmare of Catholic tyranny, they legitimized Elizabeth's own Protestant settlement, not as another swing of the pendulum, but as a rescue, a return to light after darkness. Schoolchildren memorized extracts, sermons quoted Foxe for generations. Over time, nuance vanished. Mary's naval reforms, her economic policies, her successful suppression of rebellion, her genuine popularity in early 1553, all were buried beneath the pyres of Smithfield and Oxford. Even the scale got distorted. While Henry VIII executed tens of thousands, nobles, monks, commoners, by beheading, hanging, and starvation, his violence felt political even expected. Mary's 284 executions were far fewer, but the method, burning the faithful struck a deeper, more primal horror. Fire was biblical. Fire was final. Fire left no body to bury, only ash and story. And in a culture increasingly valuing conscience and individual belief, the idea of a monarch deciding who burned for what they believed not what they did became morally intolerable. Later historians, especially in the Victorian era, doubled down. Macaulay called her the most hateful woman who ever ruled over a civilized country. Even modern textbooks often reduce her to a cautionary tale, the queen who chose fire over forgiveness. It's only recently that scholars have begun re-examining her, not to excuse the burnings, but to understand them within their time, an age when every European power, Catholic France, Protestant Geneva, Lutheran Saxony, punished religious dissent with exile, imprisonment, or death. Mary didn't invent religious terror. She inherited its logic and applied it with tragic consistency. Yet history remembers not the context, but the smoke. Not the woman who wept over stillborn hopes, who prayed daily for guidance, who believed to her dying breath that she had saved England from damnation, but the name etched in outrage, in trauma, in the collective memory of a nation that decided, once and for all, never again. So in the end, Mary Tudor's story isn't just about fire, it's about faith in a world that had forgotten how to forgive. It's about a woman who clawed her way back from erasure, only to become the very thing she feared, forgotten, not for who she was, but for what she did in the name of survival. She didn't set out to be a monster, she set out to be a queen. The queen, righting wrongs, healing rifts, restoring order as she understood it. But history rarely rewards intention, it remembers impact. And in choosing to defend truth with flame, she ensured that her truth would be drowned out by the cries of the burning, and the silence that followed. We call her Bloody Mary, not because she was the deadliest monarch of her age, but because she forced a nation to ask a question it still struggles with today, when belief becomes law, whose conscience gets to decide what's heresy, and whose fire becomes justice. That's not just Tudor history. That's our history, unresolved, uncomfortable, and deeply, painfully human. Thank you for watching. If this story stirred something in you, anger, empathy, doubt, please leave a comment. I read everyone. And if you believe history deserves more than villains and heroes, if it deserves people in all their contradiction, then hit subscribe and tap the bell. Because at Unsolved History, we don't just recount the past. We try to understand the hearts that lived it. Until next time, stay curious, stay questioning, and remember, sometimes the most haunting stories aren't the ones we get wrong, but the ones we simplify on purpose.